Welcome to episode 37 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined live in studio at a socially distanced amount of space.
I'd say so.
Yeah. By my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who finds it almost impossible to resist a good taco, John Sloat.
I do love a good taco. Doc, how you doing?
I'm doing all right.
It's Monday.
It is.
Monday, oh
September
my God.
14th.
September 14th.
Yeah.
We're halfway through September.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm doing okay. I think that, the semester is roaring away. Our now 7.5 week sessions are about halfway done.
A little more.
Yeah.
A little more than half. Yeah.
Hard to believe that. So I'm enjoying the fall weather.
Yeah, it's getting a little crisper.
I love the highs in the 70s, lows in the low 50s, high 40s. Those are just perfect kind of days for me. So
Golden days.
Indeed. We would love for you to connect with us. You can do so on Twitter at V&S Pod. You can email the show, Various and Sundry Podcast. We have a Facebook page, and we know some of you are checking it out. We'd love for even more to feel free to share when we put up the episode link. Go ahead and share that with your friends and family and your large network of people. We do greatly appreciate that. And arguably the best way you can do us a solid is to go on to the podcast app and leave us a 5-star rating and a review. And we did have one new review this past week, so shout out for that. Appreciate that very much. But there's still plenty of time, plenty of opportunity.
Yeah, we got a Facebook like from my friend Colin in Oregon today. We're big in Oregon.
Yeah, though it seems like half the state is burning down. Do I understand this correctly? Lots of forest fire activity out there.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
So stay safe out there if you're listening to us. Who knows? Maybe we have firefighters listening to us as they're seeking to put out the blaze.
Perhaps
they're passing the time in part by listening to a little Various and Sundry podcast. In any case, John, what's going on in the world of sports?
Well, it's perhaps the busiest fall we've ever seen.
Yeah, I think you could be right.
NBA playoffs are going on.
Yeah, normally October, there's a window at the end of October where you have the football season is in full force and the start of the NBA and the start of NHL and, of course, baseball playoffs. So you get that window every year typically. But this is very different because you have NHL playoffs, NBA playoffs, baseball winding down, and the start of the NFL season. So
it's a weird world.
It is.
2020.
Tell me what's going on. Well, where do you want to focus first? I mean, we got all these options. What do you want to talk about first?
Let's go NBA playoffs.
Okay.
Who did you choose to come out of the East? Remind me.
I chose the Bucks.
You chose the Bucks, who
are eliminated.
Have been eliminated, and I chose the Raptors,
who've been eliminated.
So our East is done.
Yeah.
And the Eastern Conference Finals is set for Heat Celtics, which I don't think anybody predicted.
No.
Jimmy Butler coming out of. I don't even think I knew he was with Miami this year, frankly.
Yeah, he left. He played for the Sixers last year and signed with the Heat, and that seemed to be an excellent fit.
Yeah, he seems to be doing really well, and the Celtics just seem to keep trucking. I mean, they always seem to put together a competitive squad.
Tatum has played really well.
He's elevated. Yeah. And then in the West, my finals pick is still alive with the Clippers.
Yeah, I picked them as well.
Oh, we both picked the Clippers. So both of our finals picks are still alive. Lakers are in the finals, but the Clippers conference finals. Yes, Lakers are in the conference finals. Clippers Nuggets game 7 to decide who the Lakers face.
Yeah, the Nuggets are an interesting team because in the previous round they were down 3-1 to the Utah Jazz. Came all the way back and won in 7. In this series against the Clippers, they were down 3-1, and they've won the last 2 games. And in both of those games, they've trailed by double digits midway through the game.
Wow.
And come back and won. So, it's easy to kind of dismiss this. I still think the Clippers are probably going to win, but I also wouldn't fall off my chair, blown away if the Nuggets did. because, again, you don't have home court advantage.
Who's a better matchup for the Lakers, do you think? I mean, who's going to give the Lakers a harder time?
Oh, I think the Clippers would give them a harder time.
Yeah.
I think defensively and just deeper roster, I think. Mm-hmm. I think the Clippers would give the Lakers a much more difficult time than the Nuggets. But who knows with these?
Who knows? The Nuggets seem to be playing well.
Yeah. So by the time, well, I think that game is Tuesday night because yesterday was game. Was that right? Yeah, was yesterday game 6? That was, or was that? No, that was yesterday, I think. Yeah, it was yesterday, Sunday. So that means game 7 will be Tuesday night.
When I don't respond, I just have no clue.
Help me out here, John. I'm pretty sure that game 7 then would be Tuesday night.
Yes, game 6 was last night.
So the bigger sports story was the start of the NFL season.
Yeah, it was exciting. It was good to see it back on the screen.
Yeah, breaking news, the Jets and the Browns are still terrible.
Both got killed. Yeah.
And arguably the Browns look worse. They lost 38-6 to the Ravens. I mean, the Ravens are one of the elite teams.
A lot of Super Bowl picks for the Ravens this year.
So, and they also drafted Ohio State running back J.K. Dobbins, who scored 2 touchdowns in his debut. So,
well, and I think the Dobbins pick was just we can't let this guy pass. He's too good.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk. Kansas City almost drafted him. They went with a guy from LSU instead, who also had a big opening week. So hard to argue with that. But J.K. Dobbins, I think, is going to be a terrific combo with Lamar Jackson in that backfield.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then anything else from the first weekend of the NFL that stood out to you?
Aaron Rodgers looked really good, even though they've basically hired his replacement. Tom Brady threw a couple of picks in a loss.
I saw a stat that he now is the first quarterback since like 2014 to have 3 consecutive games where he threw a pick 6.
Really?
Yeah. Like Blaine Gabbert was one of the other ones, and there was somebody else.
Well, I expect that from Blaine Gabbert.
Right.
Yeah.
It was one of those stats where you're like, yeah, that doesn't look good. I mean, again, it's the first game. I think Tampa Bay is still going to be really good this year.
I did see. So, who's the quarterback that was a part of the Bucs last year?
Winston,
Jameis Winston,
who was a backup on the Saints.
He was on the sideline of the Saints. I saw a meme that was basically like, "Well, I could have thrown 3 interceptions for the Buccaneers this year."
That's right. I mean, he threw 30 last year. That's an unheard of number in today's NFL.
And I think they still won 6 or 7 games with him, throwing 30 interceptions. But other storylines from the NFL, Gardner Minshew, I wanted to bring up
for the Jags.
Yeah, I mean he came out and played really, really well. Played really well against the Colts, and I know our Indianapolis cohort here will not be happy, but he outplayed Phillip Rivers.
Yeah, Phillip Rivers is a roll of the dice every week, I feel like. Some days you'll send him out there and he looks like he's one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the league. We'll light it up. And then other weeks it's like he doesn't even deserve to be in the league right now. Kind of terrible. So I think the Colts should expect those kinds of ups and downs. And even within a game, he'll have these streaks where he's just lighting it up. And then he'll make these inexplicable decisions where he throws a terrible pick. So.
Yeah.
We'll see about
that's everything that sticks out from the NFL. And we got Monday Night Football tonight, couple
2
of
games.
Yeah.
So that'll be nice. Tell me about your Mets.
Well, it's been an up and down week.
Okay.
We had one game that we exploded for 18 runs. We were hitting 4 or 5 home runs a game for like 3 games in a row. And things were looking, and then we lost 3 in a row. So I think we're basically out of the playoffs at this point.
Okay.
So it's a lost season. But the Mets are very close to a new owner by the name of Steve Cohen, who will be the richest Major League Baseball team owner when he buys the team.
Yeah.
And supposedly he just spends. He's just going to spend money.
Well, that seems to be part of what it takes.
Yes.
You got to spend it in the right spots.
Mm-hmm. And he's big on analytics and things like that. So he has a hedge fund he manages and uses analytics in that, and is going to bring that team over to the baseball department, from what I understand.
Yeah, it's always it's just hard to know how involved of an owner is he going to be.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of these guys, when they buy a baseball team, because you don't tend to buy it unless you're a fan at some level.
Well, and he grew up a Mets fan, this guy.
So you want to get involved, but then the ego on these guys often is, well, I've made billions of dollars. I know a thing or two about baseball. Let me start making decisions about personnel and about what we should be doing. And, you know, next thing you know, you're the Washington football team.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. The issue with the Mets has been not necessarily the baseball side of things, but keeping the baseball players that we do develop.
Yeah.
So, for instance, Zach Wheeler this last year, we can't sign him. We got to, he gets sent away to another team, signs an incredible contract, and he's a top 10 pitcher in the majors this year. That's been the main issue. So I think some of that talent now will stick. And we won't just get the developmental years with flashes of these guys, but we'll get some good years.
Well, for my money, the biggest sports news of the weekend was a sudden glimmer of hope for some Big Ten football.
Mm-hmm.
And I've intentionally been trying not to get my hopes up. But then this weekend, they convened a meeting of the presidents and the chancellors for the Big Ten Conference, and all of the leaked media reports are indicating that it's very likely that they're going to approve a proposal for a fall season starting on October 17th.
With some teams missing, though, right? It's not going to include all of the Big Ten.
I think that's part of what they're still working out. Because I do think there are some teams that don't want to play.
I've heard Maryland is out.
That's no loss for the Big Ten in terms of
Sure,
football.
but still, Rutgers, and then I thought I also heard Michigan.
Well, I know that there's been discussion of that. I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if that were to happen.
The recruiting ramifications would be huge,
and even will the university president be able to survive that? I mean, the outrage. I mean, the three biggest fan bases in the Big Ten: Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. Mm-hmm. Those are the three big fan bases.
Sure.
And if you have Michigan saying, no, we're not going to play, when Penn State's playing, Ohio State's playing, you are, I just can't imagine what kind of pushback, what kind of outrage there's going to be. And it just seems absurd when you consider that all of the states, even the ones that are maybe leaning towards not coming back and playing, all of those states either have a professional team that's currently playing or high school football going on, which seems to undercut a little bit of if it's not safe to play, why are there professional teams and even high school teams, which would have far less controls than the kind of protocols they're talking about are just through the roof kind of things where you're like, if you can't agree to that, then it's hard to envision you agreeing to anything short of the virus completely being gone to resume play. So we'll see. Maybe just maybe.
Maybe before this podcast even
launches, maybe by the time this actually goes live, this will actually have happened. But try not to get my hopes up.
I keep checking my phone for updates in case we can break it here on the pod.
Well, every time over the weekend, because they met over the weekend and they met again on Sunday, and every time I got an ESPN little buzz on my phone, like, I'm like, is that it? Is that going to be it? Big Ten announces resume the football season. It wasn't. So, but I think things are looking pretty good. Maybe we'll see some Ohio State football this fall after all. So, in any case, on to something far more eternally significant. Our main topic for today is the area of what to look for in a church.
Yeah.
And all of us, at some point, either have been or will be in a context where you're moving to a new area or something happens where you're in in need of finding a new church home. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's helpful just to think through what sort of things we would prioritize in looking for a new church home.
Yeah. I've done this several times. Dropped into a new community, moved several times throughout my growing up years, and into adulthood. And it's certainly a difficult thing to do.
It is
because it's hard to. A church service is really much more like the front porch to a church than it is the house itself.
Yeah.
And so it takes some time to dig around and understand the subtleties,
intricacies.
There we go, of a particular church. So,
indeed, and I think that oftentimes churches have a tendency to put their best foot forward on a Sunday morning.
Sure.
So that sometimes the impression you get from going to a church on Sunday and sitting through a worship service gives you one aspect of what that church is like. But oftentimes it takes branching out beyond that to get a legitimate feel for what a church is actually like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even going to oh my goodness, what sort of reputation does this church have in the community? What do other people say about it? Why have people left it? There's a number of factors to consider.
So maybe before we talk about some specifics of what to look for, maybe we should just brainstorm a little bit about if you were to move to a new area and look for a new church, where would you even start in doing research, essentially, like trying to come up with options for what might be some good churches to check out?
Sure. I immediately go to the Gospel Coalition website.
Yep.
They have a directory of churches that would sign on to their very broad statement of faith. That'd be one place. 9 Marks, I think, has something similar.
They do.
There's several of those types of resources that are out there.
Right. And it should be noted that both of those sites, I believe I'm correct on this, neither of those organizations vets the church to sort of put its stamp of approval on it. Basically, churches self-select and say, we identify with the mission and the values and the doctrinal statement of the Gospel Coalition or 9 Marks. And so I say that merely as make sure you understand what it is you're looking at on a website like that. Those organizations are not saying, we vetted this church and they have our stamp of approval.
Sure. The church has gone out and put themselves
exactly.
on that list.
The church has self-selected and said, we are identifying with them and think that based on their mission, values, doctrine, etc., we are a church that falls within what they prioritize, value, and so if you're looking for that kind of church, you should check us out.
Another thing I would do is talk to my pastor at the church I'm leaving, assuming that we're moving churches, and hey, does our network of churches have a church in this area, or would you know of any good churches? The odd thing about going to seminary is that oftentimes you end up spreading out from the people that you were friends with in your graduate program. And so somebody may know I know somebody in that town that is a part of this church or something along those lines.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think you mentioned this earlier, but even, when you move to a new area, obviously taking opportunities to ask around as you have the chance for what churches might be in the area. But I will say, I think that one mistake that people make is not getting out in front of this when you know you're going to move somewhere. Mm-hmm. So that it becomes, in the midst of all of the busyness of moving, where you're thinking about packing and unpacking and starting a new job oftentimes and getting kids in school and all that kind of stuff, that oftentimes the search for a new church home can fall down the list pretty far. And next thing you know, you've lived in a new area for a month, 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. And it's like, oh, yeah, we haven't really looked for a church. And so I think that would just be a friendly encouragement.
Be proactive.
To be proactive on the front end. Because I think oftentimes, even before you move to an area, you can often at least have identified probably 2 or 3 churches where you think, these are our starting point. Based on what we've seen from the website, or maybe a recommendation from a friend, or it's part of our church network or something like that. These would be good places to start.
That's where I would head next. After the directories and talking around town, I'd probably go to their websites, listen to everybody puts their sermons online for the most part for free. And so going out there and listening to a few sermons, reading the statement of faith, seeing what the mission of the church is, seeing what activities they have outside of the regular Sunday service.
Yeah, those are all good ideas. I think, also I would say, similar to the Sunday morning service, though, the website is, generally speaking, best foot forward kind of stuff. So that's always something to keep in mind. But, okay, so let's say we've got it to a point now where we are looking for a new church, and we've got it narrowed down to a few. And we pick one to go to on a Sunday morning. What are some of the things that you're looking for?
Well, there are some top of the list things, and then there's some preferences that I also have. Top of the list is going to be I want to hear preaching from God's Word, preferably expositionally. So I want to hear a pastor working through a text, not necessarily saying like 6 steps to be a better father or 10 steps to a healthy marriage or anything like that. I want to hear somebody walking through a text. And then I want to hear that the gospel is sort of the main thing. That's the punch of the sermon. It seems to be what the church has wrapped itself around. Those sorts of things. So those are like main things. Those would really be non-negotiables for me. And then other things that I would really want and would cause me to choose one church over another: friendliness. The people seem like they enjoy church and they're excited about things that are happening in their community. There's a general we're excited about what God is doing here, and we're excited to serve and be a part of it. So
Gotcha.
Those are some more preference things, I would say.
So what does friendliness look like?
Coffee, mostly.
Of course.
No. Like,
is that a deal breaker there, John? No coffee offered?
Because our church, as wonderful it is, did not have coffee in the foyer for the longest time until recently, and then we haven't had it since
COVID.
Then COVID, and it became a nightmare to hand out.
Your status as deacon of coffee,
I know it's in jeopardy.
Is you were in limbo here?
Yeah. We'll have to talk to Pastor Mark and see if my status as deacon of coffee is still intact.
I hope so, man. I'd hate for COVID to put a death blow to that.
Yeah, it's such a biblical role. But friendliness, like the people after service are talking to one another, are interacting with one another, seem to be involved in one another's lives, are saying hello to new people in the church, people they don't know. They're not just looking for their crowd, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So that's generally what I think of when I think of friendliness. Gotcha.
Can I suggest one thing that I think is counter to friendliness?
Sure.
I strongly dislike do we have any visitors here this morning?
Oh, goodness gracious.
Go ahead and stand up. And then they're singled out.
I would take that one step further. Hey, stand up and shake hands with people around you. I went to one church that called it hug and howdy time.
Oh, dear. No.
Yeah, not my fave.
Hug and howdy?
Mm-hmm.
This had to be in Kentucky.
You know what? I'm not going to reveal where
it had to be somewhere in the South.
I'm not going to reveal.
No one here is calling it howdy.
I'm not going to reveal.
Come on, John.
Maybe off pod, but not on a hot mic like this.
Hug and howdy. Oh my gosh.
I find that very, very
artificial, and forced, uncomfortable.
Yes, and not inviting. Personally.
Yeah, I think there are better ways to encourage. I think there are ways to encourage your people. Be attentive to those around you. After the service, before the service, if there's somebody you don't recognize, introduce yourself without it turning into this very forced, artificial mid-service, break the rhythm of whatever's going on, and
turn to your neighbor, shake their hand, and say, "Nice to meet you, friend." That sort of stuff.
Not my cup of tea. So no thanks. But
doesn't work with my introversion.
No, it does not. It does not. But that's a topic for another day. When you've mentioned faithfulness to the gospel, we've mentioned expository preaching, and this is where I do think be careful about making a snap judgment just on one sermon. This is where it's valuable to do the research, typically online, to listen to a handful of sermons, to get a flavor for the preaching, get a flavor for what it looks like, because you might visit a church and they might be, generally speaking, committed to expository preaching, but for whatever reason, they might be doing a short topical series to address something.
Yeah.
And you think, they don't do expository preaching, they're just topical church.
Well, and our church just did a series similar to that. I think it was 3 weeks on biblical community and service and things like that. And it was very helpful, very, very scripturally focused, or certainly. But now we're back into a book of the Bible. We're preaching through Daniel currently.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do think that those are some things to kind of keep in mind here. At the risk of maybe stepping on some landmines here, to what extent does the worship experience play in your evaluation of a church?
What do you mean by worship experience play?
Well, let's start more narrowly with the music. Let's just start there.
Yeah.
And things may be connected with that.
For the most part, music is not an important part. It's not a deal breaker for me. It could be hymns. It could be modern music. It could be somewhere in between.
Okay.
I think I personally get alarmed, and this is removed from worship maybe a little bit, but seeing how churches spend their money. If they have smart lights flying all over the place, fog machines, I'm just like, how is this pushing the gospel forward? How is this helping our proclamation of the gospel? And maybe it is in some places. I'm not so arrogant to think that I'm wrong. You're giving me a huge eyebrow raise right now.
I'm just waiting for the articulate explanation of how the fog machine or the laser lights or the heavy production on the lights advances the gospel. I'm welcome. So
I'm with you.
I know you're not.
Yeah.
I think I'm just making a sharper point than you're willing to make. And maybe if our listeners want to chime in at some point and say, here's how our use of the fog machine, the smoke machine, the fancy lights, all that kind of stuff, we think that actually does advance the progress of the gospel.
Sure.
Feel free to hit me up on Twitter or Facebook or email, and
debate.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
So that's, if we're talking narrowly like that, that's probably the one thing that I'm like, not crazy about. But as far as the style of music or something like that, I'd certainly want it to be well done. I think that's important to do things excellently, but that's really all I'm looking for in music, in worship. How about yourself?
Yeah, I think that to me, I am less concerned necessarily about the style. I think I'm pretty comfortable with a wide range of style. I am more concerned about the content of the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
And so that doesn't mean you have to do hymns.
Yeah.
I think you can do contemporary worship songs that are substantive and good, but if the lyrics to the worship music feel very cotton candy like, that's a red flag for me. Or even, I think this is maybe a little deeper dive to some degree, or if there seems to be a deep disconnect between the preaching, which is like substantive and meaty and strong, and then the worship music is like just, cotton candy, fluff, no substance to it. That's a bit of a concern. Now, sometimes that there are behind the scenes dynamics that create those circumstances. So I'm not saying that's a deal breaker, but I will also say I have an aversion to one thing that I like to pay attention to is the role of the worship leader, and to what extent it seems they are either drawing attention to themselves or drawing attention away from themselves. That can be a bit of a red flag as well. I get a little nervous when I'm not opposed entirely to the worship leader filling in transitions between songs with reading scripture or maybe giving some encouragement or something like that, but there are ways to do it that feel like it's about God, and there are ways to do it that make it feel like it's about you as the worship leader.
Yeah.
And that's off-putting.
I do enjoy the infusion of scripture in between worship songs, or even in the middle of a worship song, during some sort of extended time of music. I don't know I'm not musical enough to know what things are called, but in the middle of a song, somebody's riffing and they're able to read a passage. Yeah.
So I think that those are some things that are on my radar when it comes to the worship piece in a Sunday morning service.
Other than music, are you looking for anything else in the worship service particularly?
Well, I do think, and this is maybe, I'm always interested to see how they handle the Lord's table. And again, some churches do it so infrequently that it can be hard to know that. You could be at a church for a long time, several months, and never see it. And I think that can be an indicator, just a helpful insight into what the church values and even just what they think about those areas. So I'm not. I personally like to see the elders fencing the table. Now we're kind of getting deep dive into this, but in terms of restricting who should take the Lord's Supper and who should not. I always like to see that being done. But and then even just watching a baptism, what does that look like? What do they think it signifies? How are they explaining it? What sort of testimony, if any, is connected with that baptism? Those kind of things.
Very nice. How we have this down on our list. How do you gauge a church's commitment to discipleship and evangelism? Let's say you're going to attend the church for 3 months before you say, "My goodness,
become a member."
Yeah, I'm going to become a member." How do you gauge that? That feels like a tough one to wrap our arms around, doesn't it?
It is. I think that it's, if possible, a good idea before you, in one sense, kind of sign on the dotted line and say, "This is the church we're going to commit to." I think you should try to meet with one of the pastors, because you can ask more specific questions like this. Like, okay, so what does discipleship look like around here? Like, do you have formal programs? Is it more informal? Give me some examples of what that looks like. How are you encouraging it? So you can ask a pastor some of those more probing questions that you just can't necessarily get the answer from the website or attending a Sunday morning service on, for a few weeks or even a couple months. But I do think that that's probably, churches that have some context for that often have some kind of program where it's, whether it's some sort of life education program or something like that, that is findable, so to speak. That you can at least kind of go in that direction and say, okay, maybe this is a good starting point. But I do think ultimately for a lot of these questions, it's going to take sitting down probably with a pastor and just asking questions.
And I think you could learn a lot from that conversation. How thoughtful is the pastor about the order of his service, the Lord's table, baptisms, discipleship, evangelism, things like that. And yeah, I think you can get a good sense from sitting down with a pastor and talking about those things.
Yeah, and I think here's where, kind of thinking of it from the pastoral end of things, here's where I would just give the encouragement / caution that when you have that kind of conversation, a posture of humility and genuineness is going to go a long way.
Yeah.
Because, understandably, you could see how a pastor could easily, if a person approaches it the wrong way, feel like they're being put on the defensive, like they're being interrogated. Like you've got this like master checklist that they're just working through and say, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to come here. And even just, I think a person's posture can go a long way towards trying to alleviate that as I'm just trying to get a feel for what your church is like. Help me understand. I'm interested in discipleship. I'm interested in evangelism. I'm interested in missions. I'm interested in these things. Help me understand how you approach these things. Can go a long way. And there's often a place there too for, that might be the context where you ask some specific doctrinal questions. If you think, I couldn't fully tell from your doctrinal statement online what you think about this, or from the preaching I've heard, I don't have a clear sense of where your church stands on this. Can you help me understand where you guys land on this? Those kind of things. But the posture of humility and a genuine interest in learning, I think, goes a long way.
Yeah, I think it goes a long way in a lot of realms in life.
It does. It does.
Any resources you recommend? Any books?
Well, for me, I think the most helpful is probably the 9 Marks of a Healthy Church. It's a book written by Mark Dever. I think it's now in its 3rd edition. Not that any of the marks have changed. I think they've just updated some stuff.
They've grown.
That's right. But there's a whole website now that's just the number 9 and the word marks, 9marks.org. And it's become a full-blown website that's got book reviews and timely articles and thematic discussions and all sorts of things.
They have a conference as well? Does 9 Marks have a conference?
They tend to host
events at other conferences? Or they'll do they might go to a specific location and hold like a small regional kind of like 9 Marks event. Okay. I do know that I'm pretty sure they still do this. They have they have what they call a weekender, which is where a whole pastoral/elder team can go to Capitol Hill Baptist, which is the parent church of 9 Marks, and spend a long weekend there and just see behind the scenes how they do church. And I've never participated myself, but I've heard remarkable things because they give you incredible access to service planning, service evaluation after the fact, all these sorts of things that can be really beneficial. Okay, very cool.
So that would be the primary place I would start in looking.
And they also have a pretty developed plan for discipleship as well.
They do.
And education.
Yeah. And I think that they do a pretty good job of striking that balance of having some structures in place, but also encouraging informal context for discipleship and evangelism.
Sure.
That can feel like a tricky balance. The whole, we get this highly structured program that becomes formulaic, or we just have nothing and hope that something informally happens, which often it doesn't.
Yeah.
So in any case. So those are some of the things that I think we would look for as we look for churches. And, even thinking about, we do have college students here at Grace who come in and are looking for a new church home away from home, so to speak. And I know that both of us are very adamant about encouraging college students. Just going to chapel and attending Bible classes here at Grace does not substitute for the local church.
Sure, yeah. And I even encourage college students to ask the church that they're attending about, do you have any sort of college membership? I keep my membership somewhere else, but while I am here attending classes, I actually get a membership. I'm committed. I come to the meetings. I'm in classes. I'm serving. That's a grade A college student at a church for me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Are we ready to talk athlete here?
I think so.
Okay.
Number 37.
Yeah, we're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel here, let's be honest.
We have Slim Pickens, which is not one of our athletes. That's not his name.
No, but it sounds like a guy that probably played for Oklahoma State in the early 30s.
Or was a pitcher for St. Louis at some point,
I think there's actually a booster for Oklahoma State athletics. I think his name is like T. Boone Pickens or something like that.
Really?
Who, I forget how he made his money, but he's like given millions of dollars to Oklahoma State athletics. In any case, You want to walk through who we got here?
Yeah. Well, we have, and I think you're going to have to help me talk about who these guys are. Dave Stieb. And what, former
Pitched
Blue
for the
Jays?
Blue Jays, yep. Was the second winningest pitcher in the 80s behind Jack Morris.
Oh.
So, when you're the second winningest pitcher for an entire decade, that's pretty good. It's pretty good.
We have Doak Walker.
Yeah, winner of the 1948 Heisman Trophy, so that tells you how far back we're going, and is in both the College and Pro Football Hall of Fame. And he, the award in college football for the best running back each year is named after him.
Oh, all right. Lester Hayes.
Yeah, part of those teams, part of the Raiders, the Raiders in the 70s, and he was he was a lockdown corner, but he was probably best known for his excessive use of what was called stickum. Are you familiar with stickum?
It's something you roll. It's like a substance. It's almost like glue you'd put on the hands, right?
Yeah, you'd put, and this was legal in his day. They outlawed it eventually, but they'd put it on their hands or their, and their whole like uniform, so that if the ball came in contact with it,
they were catching it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so they did eventually outlaw it in the NFL, but just part of that was nasty Raiders.
Yeah. And do we have any Ohio State players that you'd like to highlight real quick?
Of course, we've got Dustin Fox, a cornerback from 2001 to 2004, and was part of the national championship team. A very good defensive back for Ohio State in the early 2000s.
And he might be the most recent player we have on our list today as well. He definitely is, yeah. All right, so who do you like?
Well, I think our options are pretty limited. I'm inclined to go more towards Lester Hayes.
I'm just for the stickum.
Just for the stickum.
Yeah, let's go Lester Hayes.
Okay, all right.
Lester Hayes.
Good with me. One thing you liked this week?
Me and my wife took her parents to Chain of Lakes this weekend, and on Saturday morning we woke up early, went out there, and hiked around for a few hours, and that was wonderful to get to walk around several of the lakes over there and hang out a little bit. Chain of Lakes in Indiana.
Okay. All right, that's not what you put down here, so...
Yeah, I changed halfway through the app, so...
Okay. Well, I'm going to stick with what I have down here.
Okay.
Even though it technically wasn't from this last week. It was a week ago. Actually, so it would have been because we recorded on Monday. Mm-hmm. I went to see Tenet with my boys.
Nice.
Tenet is the new Christopher Nolan movie, and if you're not familiar with Christopher Nolan, he did the Dark Knight trilogy. Mm-hmm. He did Inception. And so this movie is a sort of thriller that has more vibes of the of Inception. Now, Inception was a movie about, being able to get into other people's dreams.
DiCaprio, right? Yeah. Oh, that was a good movie.
Fascinating movie. So this movie has more of that vibe, and it's a movie that you definitely need to see multiple times, I think, to really fully latch on. Now, I've only seen it once because I'm not going to pay more than $7.
Sure.
I'll wait for it to come out on a streaming service and then watch it again to nail it down. But it did mess with my mind in a good way, thoughtful. Okay. So I enjoyed it. I recommend it.
Nolan's good for that.
He is. He's good with making you think a little bit, and
even the Dark Knight trilogy, even though it was Batman, it did make you think about different things. That situation with the Joker at the end of the movie and the second movie was quite menacing.
Yeah, it had a deeper vibe to it than a lot of the superhero movies. Mm-hmm. The Dark Knight trilogy did.
Yeah,
that are just, it feels like, give me some entertainment for 2 hours while I eat some popcorn kind of thing.
Yeah.
Dark Knight had a little bit more thoughtfulness, I think, to it.
Agreed.
So, in any case. So, we've covered our sports. We've talked about what to look for in a church. We've extolled the virtues of Lester Hayes and Stickum.
Yeah, or non-virtues
of
Lester.
Or non-virtues, yes. So, I'm ready to say mission accomplished. Are you?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Well, on with the rest of our day as busy people here at Grace College and Theological Seminary.
Yeah.
The show must go on. Not this show. That show must go on. This show must come to an end.
Yes.
So, until next time, The Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.